accurate. First, I'll start with the question of whether humans are individuals. I wrote about this question in my book, National Monarchy.
We're going to be addressing the question of whether humans are individuals. This is going to be a controversial claim by libertarians, that humans are individuals. What are they, then?
Monarchy, which is available in audio form on this channel, so I won't belabor my point here. Basically, humans have identities, they have qualities, and they participate in a social life, which shapes and partially determines their behaviors and
Partially determined.
characteristics. As such, humans are not individuals, but rather persons, embedded in and preceded by a social life. Thus, the proper level of analysis is always holism. And
Question: how do those social structures arise? How do the social norms arise, if not through individual choice and action? What is at the root?
an individual is that which differs only quantitatively in terms of number. The individual is a liberal abstraction that bears no relationship.
The individual is the abstraction, not the group. What does abstraction mean? Just a question. What is abstraction? Is it going from the many to the one? Is that what it means? The individual is a liberal abstraction. I have no words. Anyway, let's cover from that for a moment, whilst I read some super chats. And we got a grape calc for $10. Thank you very much. Saying, what would it take to get you to read this guy's book? How long is it? It could be a steep price for me to read this book on stream. It could be steep, depending on how long this thing is. This is terrible stuff I've seen so far. Then we got a Casimir for $2. Thank you very much. The proper level of analysis is holism, indeed.
To reality and lived experience, and any analysis focused on the individual is always going to result in only an internally consistent simulacra, such as praxeology or rational choice theory.
Which will result in an simulacra. Simulacra, of course, being plural. Based, if true, for $5. Do you think ChatGPT has cooked the minds of people in terms of actually thinking through their own ideas and ideologies? Is it the death of debate? Well, I think it just provides perhaps more overt eloquence to the already non-thinkers, like this gentleman here, like Mr. Natty Bud Light. I think perhaps he's been given too much gassing up by ChatGPT.
Second, we have to reckon with whether humans are selfish. Given that humans feel natural attachment to relatives, to members of the same race, to members of the same country or social group, etc., I think it's rather obvious that people are not all that selfish.
We have to continue. This is absurd. This is absurd. This is supposed to be a serious counterpoint to our theory.
People regularly give gifts to each other with no expectation of return. We get together and celebrate holidays, or go and dance at the nightclub, because we have fundamentally social instincts. When people are isolated from others for too long, they feel lonely. If they were purely selfish beings, then we cannot experience loneliness. The completely autarkic individual of libertarian and objectivist theory.
Not the claim. Autarky, of course, being a fully self-sufficient economy, not interacting with other economies, but autarkic individual, presumably, being entirely disconnected from other individuals. You know what the original title of Mises' Human Action was? The original working title? Social Cooperation. That was the original working title. Social Cooperation. We're not looking for autarkic individuals. Not even a little bit. Bro, you could honestly drop this and I would not be mad. This is awful. It is fairly awful, but I mean, we're so close to the end. I feel like we got to squeak it through the hole there. Diego Amateur for another 1000 CLP. Is he using the degenerate definition of selfish? I think he just conflates on every single term. So when he says, when he hears an Austrian saying that man is selfish, obviously meaning that they necessarily act to sustain their own ends, he conflates that with entirely other different understandings of the word selfish. It's just conflations across the board. Then FV Stagel, HG3DP for $5, reminds me of the debate with Hazaldin, where he put the cart, the product of free will, before the horse, free will itself, if I recall correctly. Yeah, it's pretty much it, because they love switching between positions as it suits them, which is the exact impetus behind pragmatism.
Robinson Crusoe does not exist. As Peter Kropotkin argued in Mutual Aid, the basic tendency is toward mutual support and solidarity. There are, of course, reasons why we have
Well, thank God Peter Kropotkin said it. Can't this guy have a single thought on his own? Can't you have one solitary thought that isn't rooted in, well, fucking Glupshito, he said this. Don't care. I want to see a video from this guy where it's just fully original thought. Just entirely original from start to finish. I also want to remind you that Zulu wasn't mentioned in the vid so far. Actually, correction, I was mentioned once right at the beginning. People like Mantis Wave, Zulu, and Tax Brass, I believe was his term, And then never again. He never mentioned a single one of my arguments since.
conflicts. We have natural in-group preference, and not everyone is a pro-social person, but nonetheless, humans tend to be more gregarious than libertarians let on, more than accidentally altruistic. So
More gregarious than we let on? Are you using the right word there? Not seeing a libertarian counter to gregarity. Okay. Humans are more gregarious than we would think.
to speak. Third, are humans naturally prone to rational calculation, or are our decisions
Rational, in the praxeologic sense, is different to rational in, for instance, the objectivist sense. It doesn't mean correct thought. It doesn't mean thought that is actually actively engaged with reality. It means directed thought. It means chosen thought. That is the Austrian sense of rational.
subject to a preponderance of irrationality? I did a whole video on this, so again, I'll make it short. Most decision-making happens in the preconscious mind. We often make decisions just because we are expected to by society or our close relatives, or simply because we had a certain
We often make decisions because we're expected to by society. And this is used evidence that we don't make decisions. Okay.
vibe. A lot of our behavior is irrational, like brand loyalty, trends and fads, bandwagons, etc. There's also a whole irrational part of human experience, which we tend to find very important, such as art, love, or music.
No, it's not irrational. Art can be rational or irrational. See my video on AI art, explain this in depth, or read Ayn Rand's Aesthetics.
How many books and songs have been written about people doing stupid things because they fell in love? How many people have deliberately impaired their rational faculties by drinking or binging on drugs just to feel a bit of euphoria? The essential
Again, none of this approaches the Austrian understanding of rational. It doesn't approach it. Not a little bit. Not one iota.
tragedy of the human condition is that, despite being the only creatures with the ability to rationally think, we tend to flee from irrationality and seek refuge in sensations. Libertarianism requires this to not be the case, but the reality is that we are an assemblage of 100,000 years of irrational and primal instincts accumulated over the course of evolution.
We're an assemblage. We're an assemblage. We're just assemblages, guys. Stop trying to say words that you don't know how to pronounce, please, for the love of God.
There will always be incels and idiots. There will always be losers and drug addicts. Trying to incentive them into an upright, bourgeois lifestyle just ends up marginalizing them, pushing them out of sight, not solving the human tragedy. Libertarians want a human philosophy without the humanity. We see constantly how the supposedly rational incentive structure of the free market fails to produce rational economic outcomes. I already spoke about the 2008 financial crisis. Is it rational, on the whole, to dump waste into rivers and pollute the atmosphere? It is in the short term, not the long term. Even perfectly rational people can have short time preferences. In fact, the supposed connection between high IQ and low time preference is kind of bunk. Sperber et al. 2024 redid the marshmallow test and found that there is not a strong correlation between.
We accept the fact that you're able to go on Google Scholar and look it up, okay? We accept that fact, proven it, okay. You don't need to keep bringing up random bullshit studies. You don't need to. You do not need to do any of this.
The results of the marshmallow test and adult outcomes later in life. As it so turns out, there are probably a lot of high IQ people with
As it so turns out.
time preference, which might explain why stock traders and banks gamble. So much for the 2016 Molyneux era discourse on time preference, which keeps being reheated by libertarians in current year. Now let's talk about covenant communities, which is going to be our last topic.
Didn't you already fucking talk about them?
As I've said, most anarcho-capitalists are not very conservative, so they don't really care about what others on the right might call degeneracy. But Hans-Hermann Hoppe is one of the more conservative ones, and he conceived of a concept called social costs, which aim to incorporate moral behavior into the calculations of anarcho-capitalist theory. Basically, certain actions like prostitution, drug use, or gambling do not violate the non-aggression principle. However, they do induce negative effects on other people, such as by lowering property value, reducing their propensity to save, which affects the economy overall, and also just plain being a nuisance in public. Obviously, these behaviors cannot be regulated by a state, so Hoppe invented a means of regulating personal behavior under private agreements, which is called the covenant community. Covenant communities are small societies in which members have to sign an agreement to live and work in them. This agreement is
Based if true for $5, thank you very much. What's your favorite thing about Hegel? Can you explain his concepts to me like I'm 5? When will you give back Crusoe's stick? So, I suppose my favorite thing about Hegel is that he's dead. It's very difficult to condense Hegel down into anything comprehensible. He is, I would definitely suggest looking at like lectures on Hegel, especially Leonard Peikoff's lecture on Hegel. I can give you a link to it if you want. It is tortuous. As tortuous as it is to read Kant, even more so to read Hegel. The idea is that, essentially, contradiction is the true thing, that each positive claim implies its negation, and these two things come together in contradiction to form the synthesis. And you can build up an entire structure from this. He believed you could build up an entire structure from this to deduce all of reality out, because everything in reality is mental. So this type of activity is proper. It is really, really, really wacky. I would definitely strongly caution you go in for like a lecture rather than just diving directly into trying to read Hegel. It's really, really bad stuff.
It's basically a set of laws which they must abide by, and if they violate them, then they can be physically removed. The covenant community is supposed to be compatible with libertarianism and totally not a state because membership is voluntary and one can leave at will. However, it is just a means of producing a territorial monopoly on force, which is contingent upon consent, in which case it is scarcely different from pre-existing liberal theory. Such societies have actually kind of existed, and they're called city-states. Hoppe has reinvented the city-state and called it a covenant community.
I wonder why he used the word covenant. Could there perhaps be some sort of contractual basis going on here? Maybe.
These communities would be run by a single proprietor, who's basically a feudal baron, and other than the non-existence of ownership over humans, covenant communities differ little from feudalism. In fact, reading Hoppe convinced me that anarcho-capitalism basically is just a materialistic and cynical version of feudalism, with a version of serfdom whose only caveat is merely that it is a voluntary wage relationship, which I have refuted already.
Yeah, you sure did, bud.
Murray Rothbard's definition of monarchy is privately owned government, so we must conclude that the covenant community is a species
Let's continue.
of monarchy, not libertarianism. Why not skip the pretenses and just become a monarchist? Anarcho-capitalism, in the end, is just a moral theory with an economic arrogance attached. Its bases are very flimsy, and its pronouncements on economics are so hypothetical that they basically enter fiction territory. It gets the proper prioritization of social systems flipped on its head, and in such a way, it is as cynical and desiccated as Marxism. Throughout all human history, save for the years that have passed since the advent of capitalism, men have valued the non-economic aspects of life more highly than the economic. The most important reason why we should reject libertarianism is that economies are not the raison d'etre of life, rather,
The raison d'etre.
are merely the basal precondition for what is really valuable and human. Animals can find the means of their subsistence. If to reduce human beings to the production of the necessities of life is to reduce us to animals. What is really important is everything that libertarians and Marxists consider superstructure: culture, philosophy, sociality, religion, art, music, even entertainment. Both libertarianism and Marxism militate against the human in favor of an impersonal regime of labor, and in the case of libertarianism, profit. Capitalism has atomized us enough. The problem cannot be fixed with more of it. What I've said against liberalism on this channel also applies to libertarianism. We cannot continue to have a society attached as a vestige to the market. It should be the other way around.